getting on a good track to understand why I did the things I did the way I did them would have helped me to see that the world isn't against me, that, you know, you're not always right, that you have a lot left to learn. And frankly, the older I get and the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know anything, you know, like
Exactly.
You start to see how much is out there and you realize that you're expanding your world, and the world is huge and there's so much to learn about people. And most importantly, you know, yourself. So I think change for me is not one big moment. It was daily decisions, you know, deciding to show up differently, respond differently, you know, small steps and consistency over and over.
Hello, and welcome to Working Your Way, the podcast dedicated to exploring the journey of authenticity in the workplace and discovering how to navigate it your way. I'm your host, Leah Haselhorst, and today I am joined by my guest, Leah Haselhorst. She is the VP of Marketing at Seed Talent, which is an employee enablement and brand training platform used in the cannabis industry. Now, in this conversation, we trace her path from producing large-scale events in Chicago to building a career in one of the most complex and fast-evolving industries out there. Along the way, we talk about what it really looks like to grow up professionally in high-pressure environments, how perfectionism and people-pleasing can quietly shape the way we show up at work, and the inner work required to lead yourself before you can lead others. We also get into a moment that so many people experience, but don't always talk openly about, which is being laid off and what it takes to really rebuild your identity, your confidence, and your direction from there. Leah shares how she approached that chapter with intention, using visibility, community, and really deep self-reflection to ultimately land a dream role. This episode is for anyone navigating change or stepping into something new or just trying to figure out how to show up more fully, whether that's in your career or your relationships or just with yourself. And Leah brings so much honesty and reflection and practicality to this topic. I think you're going to walk away not just feeling inspired, but with a much clearer sense of how to take your next step. So without further ado, let's get into it. Hi, Leah. Welcome to Working Your Way. I'm excited to have you on.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation with you. We met, I think it was last summer at this point, but it might have actually been I think it was 2025 in the summer we met at a summit. And so I wanted to have you on to really talk about your career, what it's like to have grown in the marketing space and particularly in the industry of cannabis, because I think there's just a lot of really intricate nuances of the industry that you're in and how you're showing up. And I'm ready to get into it.
Yeah. Cannabis is extremely nuanced. So we're talking about a lot of different phases of the career I've experienced, even just in these 8 years.
Yeah. So let's rewind a little bit. And I always love to start with, like, what was your first kind of, like, I like to call it like your real people job, or like big kid job, like your real adult job. Where did you start your career?
Prior to feeling like I was ready for an adult job, I experienced a startup environment while I was attending DePaul University, which I still credit as the launch pad for my passion and kind of the through line to everything that I decided to take on from there. I started doing music journalism for a grassroots publication called Crowd Noise with a couple friends, interviewing artists, covering hundreds of shows. And really through all of that, I learned how rooms and culture move and how communities get built around a common mission. That evolved into producing events for the publication at South by Southwest, and most notably with NPR series that featured Taylor Gang and Chance the Rapper and some other artists that have since been discovered. So from there, I moved into freelance events before starting as what I would constitute as my official big girl job for the first time as venue director for a venue in Wicker Park. I learned venue operations at a large scale and how to handle logistics, high pressure, hospitality, hiring, independent contractors, and overall really sharpening my presence and leadership skills.
What did you study in school? Was that all like related to what you ended up going into?
Yeah, thankfully it was. I draw on my communications and media studies major quite a bit. I also majored in public relations and advertising, so it was pretty much the whole gamut of what I do today. And I would say I was really drawn to the communications and media studies side of things because I'm a writer. I'm very passionate about expressing myself. So I think everything kind of worked in a nice way. But the PR and ad side felt more corporate than I was ready for at the time.
I was wondering if, like, for the venue, like managing events and working at the venue, primarily were you working on concerts, corporate events? Was it a little bit of everything?
Yeah, we were privately owned space, so there was only one of us. And
You were it.
we were it. It was a family-run business. So there's beauty in that we can have a lot of flexibility with the events that we produce. So I was in charge of the private event side of things, and we had a talent buyer who did all of the concerts. And the main difference there was just the structure of the contracts for those different experiences. But I got to do some really creative, everything from fashion shows to we had a couple fun events like freelance wrestling, trap karaoke. We would do full-on weddings. We would do huge birthdays. And one of my favorites was a birthday buyout that we did for this gentleman who hired the CCR Revival Band, and Creedence Clearwater
Wow.
band is one of my favorites. So I got to experience a lot of fangirl moments while I was there, meeting some wonderful artists. And I assisted in the concerts as well. Music is probably my favorite thing in this world, going to concerts, seeing how they operate in and out. So I didn't necessarily work directly booking those, but I was there for them. I supported everybody. We all kind of supported each other. But, we had Carly Rae Jepsen come through when M&M's did a huge buyout with Universal Music Group, and just got to really see how different groups operate in the events world. And it was just really exciting.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of versatility and variety, even in that, of like a corporate event with a big concert all the way down to like a person's wedding where you're working with them, right? As the individual that the big stakeholder, right? For a very personal and an important moment in their life. So what were some of the things that you, I guess, learned about people as you did that? There's probably so many things. So it's a hard question.
No, that's a great question, though, because I mean, that's life, right? Learning how to navigate rooms and different personalities. I learned very early on not to mirror people's energy, to show up with how I wanted to show up. And, there are a few examples, particularly, some of the day of wedding planners in the industry can be very intense. People have a lot of opinions and how they want things to go. I learned early on weddings were not for me. However, I loved the couples that I did work with. The venue was obviously more set up for concerts and events like that. So it was very unique. And the folks that did have weddings there were pretty cool, I would say. But learning that we can disagree and still find the common ground was definitely the biggest revelation there. Also understanding how you present your arguments can either sway the room or not. Learning how folks work and their standards of work, like not imposing my standards of how things should be done on others in a way. I was a very motivational centered leader. So if I had independent contractors who were hired for the event and maybe they weren't doing things the way I liked it done, I would be in the trenches with them and show them first and then hold them to that standard going forward. So, I'm very much that coach who runs with the class.
Yeah, I like the lesson of like not mirroring people's energy. And for me, it like makes me think about early on in my business, I had someone who had wanted to work with me, bring me into the organization. And I just remember every time I would get on a call with this particular person, they brought this really frantic energy. And I would like then kind of feel that, right? And like be in that frantic energy with them instead of kind of like really being able to guide and push forward, like, what do we need to do? How do we get clarity? Like, I found myself confused and like cloudy and frantic in my head. And so I'm curious for you, like, as you learned not to do that, were there things that helped you not do that? What did you change or how did you approach it?
Absolutely. I think the real shift for me was setting boundaries and taking that pause, that kind of 2-second pause to respond instead of react. And sitting in that discomfort is something that I have been working on my entire life, giving myself time to think and the grace to rebound and respond. As someone who has had a lot of those different kinds of conversations, you really do get to set the tone as long as you're prepared. If you wake up and you go into something without preparing, I think for me, being prepared has been the key to a lot of the success I've found in negotiations, in working with difficult people, because exactly, if you let their energy lead into how you want the conversation to go, and you don't have those sort of parameters for yourself or those little one-liners in your head to keep you centered, it is very easy to get derailed.
Yeah. And so what did preparation, like obviously having a list of things you needed to go through, having those one-liners for you, what else maybe falls into that bucket or did for you at that time?
For sure. I'm a huge podcast person, and I have a mental reset playlist on for myself that I have started adding in different like 15-minute podcasts from various creators that I follow, that having their voice in my head really centers me. At the time, there was this woman I discovered who is a fabulous life coach focused on feminist socialization called Cara Lowenthal, and she's got a wonderful podcast and a book. So her methodology of thought work helped me to kind of unpack a lot of those people-pleasing patterns, which I think a lot of us fall into, right? You just want the conversation to go well. You just want it to maybe end. You just want everything to go smoothly. And that can be people-pleasing, and an avoidance of pushing back sometimes costs you more discomfort in the long run. So is it better to have that strong conversation at the onset? So preparing for some of those conversations, having her in my head, having some other influential people in my head beforehand, oftentimes reading, doing breath work, just getting in the headspace, picking a strong outfit, getting myself fully ready and looking in the mirror and saying, you are the person who's going to handle this today, bar none. Just kind of giving myself these different pep talk points has generally been helpful. It's not always perfect, but who is?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm in my head, I also was thinking like, gosh, like just even arriving at the space early enough to, leave room for time where the CTA bus is running late. And, so it's like you're grounded, you're centered, you're in the space before kind of like a client's energy comes in and swirls everything up.
Oh, you hit the nail on the head. I can't believe I forgot that one. I am usually the first person everywhere I go.
Really?
Exactly because of that. I think I am very spatially oriented. I like to get my environment set. I like to have my beverage there. I like to have my little comforts, or even sometimes I'll take a sticky note with a little motivational quote. My favorite one is I have it written down and I have it as bookmarks in a lot of my books, in my journals, in my portfolios. It's the Steve Jobs when he says, get your mind around it. You can do it. Because for me, a lot of the times when I'm getting new information or meeting somebody new, it feels quite overwhelming. And like to your point, when you mentioned that you can get fuzzy and things can sort of glitch and then all of a sudden it's blank, to avoid that, I give myself that extra time. And that quote continuously reminds me, all I need to do is get my head around it. Once I've gotten my head around every challenge in my life, I've been able to move through it.
I love that. I love that. So during that time, we talked about some of the exciting parts about it or some of the things you learned. Like, how were you, or were you not, maybe able to kind of show up authentically in that space?
I think the authentic shift came when I realized that, performing or being impressive and being aligned are two different things. So I dove heavily into aligning my professional self with my personal self and merging those two versions of me. So, authenticity was more like knowing my standards, communicating them calmly, and realizing that, failure and trying things and maybe not working out is the price of success. Fail fast, fail often is something that I've always been told, and I think rings true. Growing up as a perfectionist and the daughter of an immigrant mother who really had extremely high standards for all of us. I had to grieve the fantasy of being perfect or achieving perfection to feel good enough, to feel like I was worth the opportunity, or that, I didn't replay things over and over in my head. So, really coming to terms with the fact that if you mess up, that doesn't mean that you are messed up or that there's something wrong with you. And I think as women, we often get socialized at a young age to be that good girl and to please others out of safety or approval or whatever it may be. So unlearning that conditioning has been a huge factor in getting to my most authentic self.
And so what were some of the failures that maybe you learned the most from, like in that venue management work?
A huge point I'll never forget is at there were times when some of the leadership folks and I would butt heads. We would have different viewpoints on how things should go. And when I would get really passionate about my stance, I maybe didn't present it in the most compassionate frame. And I think framing is a big piece of communication that can get lost when you're passionate or excited, or that your way to you is the correct way. That created some internal conflicts that were difficult to rebound from for our team. I noticed it in my coworkers who were all struggling with something personal, but then also in myself. So it was almost like I was in a sea of me's, and we were all dealing with our own personal struggles, and we were all trying to do what was best for the business, but there was nobody project managing it through. We didn't have like a North Star of any sort. Being a venue, you kind of just grab opportunities, and there's, sort of a North Star about, the kind of vibes you want to create in the space, but having it, I think, be so open. We definitely had a couple extreme arguments during some of our leadership meetings that resulted in, us just kind of feeling against each other. And I never wanted that to happen in any future environment. And since then been very aware of potential hostility or any kind of reframing that can be done to set the tone for a group when we're having difficult conversations or overlapping priorities.
Yeah. As I'm assuming this is like early 20s that you were doing this work, right? Like that kind of first adult job. I mean, it's a high...
I was 26, I think.
Okay. So in your 20s, like it's a very high bar to know enough about communication to know I need to regulate myself. I need to frame things in a certain way, right? Like, and I think the experience of like growing up the child of an immigrant, having kind of that like real social radar, is very helpful in that sense. I think there's like what you mentioned, right? Of like, I know who I need to be. I know what's expected of me. Like, I want to make sure that I'm not rocking the boat too much, right? A lot of that comes along with that. And just like a general adaptability. But I'm really curious about, realistically, for someone in their 20s to be in a room with, owners or GMs or people that are kind of big stakeholders and things.
Mm-hmm.
How was that experience for you to like learn your way through it while it was happening?
At the beginning of my self-discovery journey, I had just become, one of the things that helped me get through, particularly at the venue, was starting my medical cannabis journey. That's when I first started seeking kind of some support. I hadn't done any therapy yet, which in retrospect, that's one thing I would change about my life early on, is I would get into therapy right when I started college, probably earlier, as early
Right,
as
when
one
we're
can.
bored, basically.
Oh
we
my
should
gosh,
start it right away.
yes. That is my only regret in life. If I had to choose one, is not starting this self-discovery journey earlier. I would read so many self-help books, and I love the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh and a lot of other introspective authors. So I was on the path, and I did a lot of yoga and a lot of that. But I think really getting on a good track to understand why I did the things I did the way I did them would have helped me to see that the world isn't against me, that, you're not always right, that you have a lot left to learn. And frankly, the older I get and the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know anything, like
Exactly.
you start to see how much is out there, and you realize that you're expanding your world, and the world is huge, and there's so much to learn about people. And most importantly, yourself. So I think change for me is not one big moment. It was daily decisions, deciding to show up differently, respond differently, small steps and consistency over and over, and just treating fear as an energy and not a stop sign.
I just wanted to pop in here for a second to share how much I love Leah's passion for self-learning. I truly believe that understanding ourselves better is the best thing that we can do for our relationships, both in and out of work, and especially as people rise into leadership roles. It's really imperative that they're continuing that self-discovery journey. Now, I can't tell you how many times I've worked with some pretty senior leaders who had employed one strategy of operating and showing up, which had been really successful for them at work. And then they get to a different level or a different company, and they need to adapt that thing or sometimes lose it altogether. And this is one of the deepest and most insightful things about the work that I do with clients and myself, honestly, with the Enneagram, which if you know me or listen to this podcast often, you know that this is really my tool of choice for both coaching and self-discovery, and also building team effectiveness and trust. Now, what this model helps us do is see with clarity and notice when we're using these kind of coping strategies to get our needs met. And at some point, those strategies that served us really well at one stage of our life or career kind of begin to backfire. Now, as an example, for a lot of her career, Leah talks about being the most prepared person in the room, having all the information really well thought out, having all the things that she needs around her, and really building that groundedness in a space. Now, over time, we get to move from maybe needing to be prepared for anything and everything into trusting ourselves and our lived experience and our wisdom. And this requires you to let go of the preparedness as the way you achieve success, and you then evolve as a leader. Now, we all have these things. I'm just using this one as an example, but I see it really often. The thing that got you here is not necessarily going to be the thing that gets you to the next place. And when we learned one way of being from a really early age, it becomes kind of a coping mechanism that's really hard to let go of. It almost can feel existential. Now, Enneagram isn't the only tool for this kind of self-discovery, of course. Really, the way around this kind of change point of knowing what you maybe need to let go of is just continuing that learning and self-discovery journey using any tool or modality that is really effective for you. It's about having that mirror or maybe a contextual framework to help you question the ways that you get things done or the ways that you work with people, and see how they might be helping you still or how they might be holding you back from real evolution and growth. Okay, let's get back into the conversation where we dive into Leah's relationship with cannabis and her transition into the industry. You mentioned during this time you also began exploring medical cannabis, and that was something that was really helpful for you. So talk about that and that as a maybe reason that drew you to the industry in the first place.
Yes, it absolutely did. Absolutely did. So I was in some, interesting situations prior to working at the venue. I had a good amount of trauma experiences, we'll call it, and chronic pain, all related. And when I tried medical cannabis, I had first gone to a dispensary in Wrigleyville, and I'll never forget trying my first indica strain of Bio Jesus by Cresco, and the way that it relaxed my nervous system and totally calmed me down physically, and just let me kind of experience relief in a time that just felt like the world was moving too fast. I really started exploring and journaling more, and trying different strains, different formulations, mainly from the Cresco Labs dispensary, because at the time it was just medical in Illinois, so we had not gotten adult use yet. And I had, my card, so there was only a limited amount of areas or dispensaries I could go to. And then one day, Cresco Labs inquiry came into my Chop Shop system in the venue, and I was able to take that demo and that site visit very seriously. I treated the whole visit as an audition. I, made everything look sparkling. I put their logo everywhere. I landed the job and the event. They bought out the whole place. And from there, I was able to meet a lot of the executives, and eventually my boss. So about an hour into it, the current lead of events asked me if I was looking for a new gig, and to which I replied, absolutely. She introduced me to the leader of marketing and the whole company, and it was just very aligned. They got to see me in action doing what I was going to be doing, which was leading national events there, for the executive side, for the brands, and everything in between. So that was very much felt like a movie moment and divine timing.
Yeah, I mean, talk about serendipity and
Yes.
alignment of your skill set, what you're good at, your experience, and then kind of this personal purpose angle of these products have really helped me, and then you get to work with the manufacturer and do an event for them. Very, very cool. And I heard in that how seriously you took that opportunity, right? So it's like the universe kind of sent you this okay, well, here it is, step up, rise to this opportunity. And so how did you treat that event differently than maybe others?
Yes. I will say I had a certain level of hospitality anxiety throughout every event I did. This one just felt more like I would work on refining every step of it over on the weekends and in my off hours. So it wasn't that I put more work or more intentionality into this specific event. It was just that it was so fun for me. And I was lit up from inside. I loved the woman who was leading up everything. And I just liked the way she talked to me, respected me. I liked her approach. I liked, the brand itself was fun to play with. I prepared to have, other suggestions ready for them. And just kind of made sure to check in as much as I possibly could, but overall was just kind of running through visualizing how that day was going to go over and over in my head to determine different touch points where, okay, if I am super on it and they see me doing this, they're going to think this. And I think a big part of success in any event, in any meeting, anything big that you might be nervous for or really want to perform for, leads up to that preparation I was talking about. And part of that is visualization. I'm a big visualization person. If there's something coming up, I will close my eyes the night before and walk through every detail of it, from getting up and doing my hair to getting to the venue, what I'm going to do in the car, where I'm going to park, how I'm going to walk in, when my bathroom breaks will be, like everything super detailed out. That way I can always be present and feel like I got this. And a lot of times excitement, which I was purely so excited for this, I knew it was going to go well, but excitement feels a lot like anxiety in the body. So, being able to visualize and tell your brain that you are prepared for this, you've done everything you can, you've crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's, just truly, truly helped me to execute at the highest level.
Okay, I want to pause on this idea that Leah mentioned about visualization, because there's actually a really simple reason this kind of technique works, and it's rooted in science, which is always really helpful for me to know, at least. So in essence, your brain doesn't fully know the difference between something that you vividly imagine and something that you actually do. When you mentally walk through a moment, oftentimes our brain can start activating some of the same pathways as if we were really in it. And so it's almost like an actual rehearsal. And that matters because a lot of our anxiety comes from the unknown. Like, what's going to happen? Am I ready? Or how's this going to go? And so visualization can really soften that. It can give your brain this sense of familiarity with something before you even get there. So instead of walking into something cold, your brain's like, oh, we've kind of been here before. I also really love what she said about the level of detail, because it's not just about picturing the big moment, the big presentation. It's the small stuff. Walking in, where you're standing, how you start, how you recover if something feels off. That part really helps you stay grounded and present. So it's not about being perfect, but it's more like giving yourself a sense of steadiness before doing something that matters. Using visualization as a way to prepare yourself for different ways that things might go and to walk in with that groundedness and that comfort level. So if you have something big coming up, even just take a few minutes and run it through your head. You don't have to do anything fancy or have any special technique. Just see it, feel it, walk through it, and it can make a really big difference. Okay, let's get back to the conversation and hear more about how Leah leveraged this amazingly aligned opportunity to shift her career trajectory and land her where she is now. I want to talk about how you made this transition from kind of like being purely events to moving into a new industry. But I imagine like working with a corporate event from like M&M's, like you had mentioned, is going to be very different than working with a company like Cresco, where you may have a lot more space to play and help maybe ideate and innovate around how their brand shows up. Whereas like a big corporate company is going to be pretty specific and precise about what they want to do. Is that true? Did that feel that way for you?
I think at the time, I thought that, Cresco was, it certainly was and still is the largest MSO. And at the time, it felt like there would be more people operating it than there were. And I think that is the misconception with a lot of cannabis companies, is you see their footprint, their impact, their marketing, and you think, oh my gosh, they must have so many people running this business. And then you realize, oh, there's only one person doing all of this. And I was the second hire for my team. So it was truly my boss and myself. And then, she reported up to our head of marketing, but there were also like different departments in the marketing. There was the brand side, there was the retail side, there was, the graphic designer. So they really had a traditional kind of like marketing setup, but within each department, there were not very many people. So I think that was an interesting realization. And I felt excited by that because it kind of carried over that startup mentality that I experienced in college. And I think the startup mentality has always been part of what I like, because you can so much creatively influence where the company is going to go. And I really did feel, from the very beginning, we had ownership of what events we were going to be at, how we wanted to execute them. My ideas were listened to. I had, we got to get much more into the experiential events activations, which I had taken over from the venue for a lot of the fun ideas that I had, working with cool rental vendors and artists, and creators. So it felt super aligned. And although it might seem corporate in that sense, I discovered that in this cannabis industry, there is a lot of room for creativity because you still need to stand out.
Yeah. So before we talk about your move to Seed Talent, I am curious about, as you got into the cannabis industry, what were some of the challenges that you experienced, whether it's being a woman, being a young person, maybe being kind of like an industry outsider? What was that transition into the industry like, and what were some of the challenges?
I would say the transition into cannabis felt like a breath of fresh air. It felt like true alignment for me. I am still in this volatile business because of the people. Granted, not everyone is is awesome, but the overall tone, if you are in cannabis, you're here for a reason. It is hard. So if you've stuck with it, you care about the plant, you care about helping people. A big reason I still stick with it too is I have a sister who is epileptic, and I saw a video on YouTube early on of an epileptic person being administered RSO, and it totally calmed their seizures, and they were able to navigate life. And seeing the way that medical cannabis has helped so many people, how it's helped me, I just felt so connected to it, so that any of the challenges that would come up, they just felt like a normal part of this industry. Now, industry challenges are separate from interpersonal work challenges. And there were certainly some of those, like you said, feeling so new to not just cannabis, but the corporate style of operating was definitely a transition into more professionalism. But there were so many wonderful women that I was able to, and gentlemen at Cresco Labs, that I still talk to, that were so many notches higher than me on the leadership rungs, but they empowered me to step up and lead meetings. They supported me. They told me my ideas were cool. And I just felt like I was able to build. We did a lot of happy hours too. And we did a lot of cultural work events to get to know each other. And I met some truly wonderful people who created a safe space for me to kind of be creative.
And so, as you've left this kind of very structured environment, what has that been like for you? And talk about your transition into your current job.
It was a wild transition. I was super attached to my work identity, my professional identity at Cresco Labs when it happened. I was part of a round of layoffs, which was super unfortunate, but it was reassuring to know I wasn't alone in that. And it was the first time I'd ever had something like that happen to me. So right when it happened, I just closed my laptop and I went to the lake and I jumped in and I stayed at the beach all day and just kind of reconnected with, okay, this isn't me, that extreme detachment. And I think just being as that empathetic kind of person that I really had my heart and soul attached to this job. And that's, stepping back, and super unhealthy to align so much of your worth and your identity with a job, because it's just how you pay your bills at the end of the day. So I really,
as you mentioned, it can disappear overnight, right? So then it's what are you left with holding if that title goes away?
Yes, absolutely. So I was faced with, myself, and did a lot of introspective work. I connected with old friends that, mentors. This is when I really started building my reinvention, I called it. I made a master spreadsheet, and this was before AI came into the fold. So I was doing all of this manually. I was taking contacts from LinkedIn and putting them in my spreadsheet, jobs from LinkedIn in another tab. I applied to over 80 jobs And realize that casting a wide net is not always the best choice because, all of a sudden then you get these couple options down and you're like, okay, I wasn't intentional about casting this net. And now I have a couple, finalists and I don't want any of them. So I tried that strategy and then I pulled back and I took some extra time and I made some phone calls to my old bosses and some mentors I really respected and just had more conversations with people who were happy with what they were doing. And then I realized that throughout this, continuous learning has always been a big part of my life. I love, if I could go back to college, which, I always loved learning, being in lectures, expanding my worldview and my perspectives. When I discovered Seed Talent, I felt this alignment early on. And then one day I opened up my LinkedIn and my current boss, Kurt, had messaged me asking if I was interested in joining because they needed a marketing lead to head up the marketing department for the first time. And at this time, the company was only about 2 or 3 years old. So they were still building out departments and everything. And I met with him and our current VP of sales, Justin, and just really clicked with those two. I liked the way they operated. I liked the way they treated people. I love the business. I love learning. And so I said, yes, let's do it. And I think, really a big goal of mine when I transitioned out of Cresco to Seed Talent, because Cresco was just this, huge entity. Seed Talent was more of a startup. I decided, okay, this is my time to find my people. I wanted to find my fellow weirdos in a way. There's those people that you just feel a kinship with them and you can't exactly pinpoint why, but they have this hustle, they have this drive, and they're centered around a mission to help people. And I, since then, have only strengthened those bonds with everybody. We've hired some wonderful new people, and we've expanded to help hundreds of thousands of bud tenders, brands, and retailers across the country. And it's just given me such a rewarding sense of purpose every day. Because as I said, if you're going to be in this business, you need to have a strong sense of purpose and you need to be in it for the right reasons to be successful. I mean, there are plenty of people who are in this for the money, but they're not going to last long and they might actually be miserable. I have the opportunity to be doing something I love and enjoying the business side of it as well, because I put so much intentionality into how I wanted to show up and brought like my realist, highest self to that first interview. And that's how everything kind of kept growing.
Yeah. And so what do you think led to, that opportunity coming to you? Because it kind of in a similar way to when you joined Cresco, like showing up in whatever way you show up, like to me that it seems like that attracts the right thing to you.
Absolutely. I was heavy on my LinkedIn content and building my personal brand at the time. And the way that you kind of just described these opportunities showing up in my life, I credit to really building this sort of magnetism where, there's this beautiful saying that, if you build a garden, the butterflies will show up. The butterflies will come, but first you have to build the garden. You can't just go and grab them and put them into an environment they're not ready for. So really working on myself, building my brand, sharing my achievements on LinkedIn. You mentioned, being highly visible. I really started leaning into high visibility activities, mobilizing my advocates, asking mentors to write. And this was heavily on LinkedIn because LinkedIn is a really safe space for cannabis these days. It's where a lot of people are hired. It's where we share our insights. It's where we come together as a community. So I really was working on not minimizing my contributions, like owning my resources, celebrating others, showcasing everything I've done, and really advocating for myself in a way that I hadn't done as much prior, just because I had been so busy with work. So I was able to say, okay, here's what I'm good at. here's my brand, my personal brand ethos, and then showcasing that with a series of different content pieces. And also interacting with others. You know, people think LinkedIn is just post, set it and forget it. Like, it is an interactive community where you should go in the comments and you should, take side meetings with people. And I was doing a lot of these, little coffee talks and things with folks who were interested in my content, and the content at the time being experiential events, cannabis, building communities. And to this day, I still center on those three pillars. And just having this kind of open and collaborative and warm tone seemed to be something that resonated with people and invited more followers into the space. I was also sharing a lot at the time of my Thursday Thoughts, which was a series I created out of my love for the psychology of self-awareness and thought work. And I think that a lot of people in cannabis were struggling at that time. And when I go out to events, just to network, I'd have people come up to me and say, your post the other day really hit me when I needed it. I was having a hard time. And, I saw that and it helped me get over this. And so in the in-between time from my layoff to starting at Z Talent, I was just heavily investing in the community that was already following me and doing a lot of listening. What are they? There's great analytics tools too in LinkedIn that'll show you what people are interested in the most, what posts perform the highest. But really what helped guide me was being out in the world and having bud tenders, having fellow events professionals come up and say that I helped them. When really I was doing it because I needed some sort of pillar for myself, but I was just grateful that I was able to help people in the process. So I think everything really starts with you and how you're taking care of number one.
One of the things I really like about Leah's approach is that she didn't just treat LinkedIn as a place to post. She treated it as a place to build relationships, which I think is probably really what it's meant for. But we can all fall into that trap of just posting and running on to the next thing. I think that's where so many people maybe miss some of the opportunity, including myself. Now, what she described was incredibly intentional. She was sharing her work, her perspective, her voice, but she was also engaging, responding to people's comments, responding to people's posts, starting conversations, reaching out to people, setting up meetings. She understood that visibility isn't just about being seen, but it's really about being known. And what's powerful is that this didn't just stay online. She took those conversations and relationships into the real world, into coffee chats, into industry events, into conversations that deepened the connection that allowed somebody who maybe saw a post that she did to meet her in person and brainstorm or throw ideas around or maybe even find an opportunity. So then when a great opportunity came her way, it wasn't random. It wasn't just luck. It was the result of consistent, aligned visibility paired with that real in-person relationship building. Now, there's a moment that she shared that I loved, which is talking about, if you build the garden, the butterflies will come. And that's exactly what she did. She really built a body of work, a presence, a community that made it easy for the right opportunity to find her. So if you're listening to this and thinking about how can I apply this to my own career, my own career path, potential opportunities, or really just establishing yourself where you are, first, I think it's about thinking beyond posting. Of course, you should share your perspective and your work and your insights, but also really spend some time engaging. Comment thoughtfully on other people's posts where it makes sense for you, where it's relevant. Respond to people, support your friends and colleagues. Treat it like a conversation, not just a content channel. Second is to take one step to move a digital connection into a real life relationship. And that could be a coffee, a virtual chat, or even just a more intentional message. It's really where trust in the foundation of a relationship actually gets built. And I guess last but not least, focus on consistency over perfection. Leah wasn't waiting until everything was perfectly polished. She was showing up regularly, sharing what mattered to her, giving it a brand and a voice, but really it was about staying connected to her community. I know this might be the hardest part for a lot of you. It is definitely for me. I can get stuck in that procrastination, perfectionism trap where I want my post to be perfect, and so I just don't do it at all. But it's important to remember that small steps really help build a new muscle. So for me, maybe it's spending 10 minutes scrolling and engaging on other people's posts. And that feels far more doable than spending 10 minutes writing my own post. Reacting in conversation with others is always easier for me than initiating a topic. And so that's something I've learned about myself over time with a lot of kind of self-understanding and self-study and seeing what my energy is more attuned to. And so consider starting with a realistic approach to help build the habit first and see how that goes for you. It could be a different way of engaging. It could be using LinkedIn to search or research. It could be posting, or it could be something totally different. The engaging thing is just what works best for me, but you get to think about what works best for you. Okay, let's wrap up the conversation with Leah by hearing about how she tackled the next big opportunity and really grew herself into that role. During the time that you were laid off, it sounds like you were very intentional and strategic about your visibility, and then not just, posting, like you said, engaging, but then also like taking those relationships off of the platform, right? And having meetings, right? Calling your mentors, doing all that kind of stuff. And so that led you then to like literally an opportunity falling in your lap in a way, right? And it's not like just by luck, right? It's by all the work that you had put in before too.
Yeah, I love the quote that it's luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So, I mentioned being extremely prepared for everything that I do, even this conversation, I think just staying prepared for the things that matter to you. If for me, I can rest easy if I know I did my best. I tried my hardest and I put everything I could into that going well. Do I make mistakes? Yes. I definitely have slip ups. But as long as you've done the best you can to adapt and improve and prepare yourself, those opportunities are going to come. They're just going to. And that's how I've had these sort of kismet, fate seeming moments and opportunities, come to me because I stay true to that alignment, or at least I try to.
And so you had a lot of things working for you in terms of being really passionate about the industry, being someone who values learning, having experienced the impact of what you do at Seed Talent on the clients, the customers, the end state users. But I'm curious, like, as you went from Cresco to being like an events person, right? You're an expert on that. You've done it a million times. You know just how to do it well, to then leading marketing. It feels like a big step up, a big like call to or an invitation for you to expand. Like, did you experience like doubt as you evaluated that opportunity, or what was it like to go from events to overall leading marketing?
Yeah, it was, I'm not going to lie, it was something I knew that I wanted to do, but I was quite terrified. I kept coming back to the fact that, the worse your adversity or the harder something feels, the greater the opportunity. And I was just very much in a growth phase. I knew this team felt aligned and I wanted to always step up. And, ultimately you have to realize that if, I had a goal of being more remote and not being so physically drained being at events all the time. And I knew I love events and I always will, but that was a big driver for me learning new skills. Because if I stuck with just events, I was always going to be out in the field. I was always going to be at a site visit. I was always going to be leaving my house. And with the chronic pain I was feeling at the time, I really needed to be home and I needed to stretch and I needed to lay on the floor, to be totally honest with you. I would take some calls from the floor.
Which you can't always do in a convention center, unfortunately, or a hotel ballroom. Yeah.
Yeah, and you certainly can find a spot, but you're not going to be able to really relax. And right. So it was about putting my physical and my mental health first. And so I kind of created this, I filled a lot of the gaps. Once I took the job, I had about 3 months to prepare. Maybe it was more like 2 months, actually. At any rate, I identified the gaps that I would need to fill, and I started creating YouTube university of sorts for myself. I followed a bunch of different creators and I would make different playlists. One of them was all about SEO. One of them was all about WordPress and website development. I literally run every part of the marketing ecosystem here at Sea Talent. The only parts I started out feeling confident in were social media and events. And luckily, events was our big strategy when I first got into it. But I had all these other things. And the biggest one that I really needed to learn about was product marketing. You know, we are a SaaS company and I had never worked in software before. But, you know, I am very technologically savvy. So it felt really cool to be able to pick up on these tech and product releases and work with our IT team and work with the people, the developers and the engineers who are historically some of the nicest people you'll ever meet in business. I love developers. Software engineers are just some of the kindest folks in the world, and I can learn so much from them. So just being able to familiarize myself with the platforms we use, from Jira and Atlassian all the way to Trello and the project management systems. I use YouTube for everything. I took courses on, funny enough, Coursera, which is another wonderful free online learning tool with coursework from Harvard professors, University of London. I actually took a branding course with the University of London while I was in this transitional period. So I was doing everything I could to self-teach, and I would block my schedule every day for 4 hours to learn something new, take notes. And then eventually I built out a marketing plan, a 30, 60, 90 when I kicked off, that helped me transition into the first 90 days of the business and really set us up for success. Were there surprises that came up? Yes. Did everything get derailed? Yes. But ultimately, I had the plan and the preparation, and I believed in myself that, okay, if I could learn and implement these things, then, you know, I've done it before and I'll do it again kind of mentality.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to that quote that you mentioned about like getting your mind wrapped around things and then believing that you can do it, right? It feels like such a mantra for you, like throughout your whole career.
Mm-hmm. It really is. And it's cool to look back. And that's why I'm such a heavy believer in celebrating your wins, tracking your wins. I have a calendar reminder every Friday. I'm a big calendar blocker too. That was a huge thing because time is only as good as your structure. So I would block every Friday to look back and celebrate one win. And I think that's where LinkedIn actually really helped me shine too, was because so much of it was showcasing the work I'd done. And then I'd be like, oh, dang, I did that. That was actually a huge endeavor. So when you're in it, you don't really see the long tail impact until you're like, oh yeah, we closed hundreds of thousands of deals, hundreds of thousands of dollars in deals from the event that I put together. That is cool. You know, so to be able to really measure that and look back and reflect was a big driver of my motivation during that hard transition. Because if you don't just stop and say, okay, I'm doing it. I was here and now I'm here, because progress is not this, you know, it's this. It's a spiral, and you're going to go back and you're going to doubt yourself. But then that's just one more hurdle you've overcome, right? So, yeah, I just kind of had to give up the cycle of disappointment and give up the facade of perfectionism and just kind of give up in the best sense of the term. You know, just give up what you think you know about yourself and what you think you know about business, and stay true to consistency.
How would you name this, like, way that you go about? It's like mindset work, it's positive self-talk. Like, there's a lot of things wrapped up in it. And I'm just curious, like, how you think about it, because I've heard that all throughout your story of like, you know how to like get yourself ready for an opportunity or affirm yourself. Like, what do you call it?
I refer to it as thought work, typically. I think a lot of this is metacognition. And when you are a trauma survivor, we are blessed with this superpower of thinking about your thinking. You know, you have to, because if you stay in that negative mindset of this defines me, you're going to stay in that spot in life. So, when I realized that I had the power to transform my thoughts, for example, someone cuts you off in traffic. Okay, you can honk and road rage and be super pissed off, or you can say, oh my God, maybe they're rushing to their daughter who is in trouble. Like reframing your thoughts, I think between affirmations and thought work, really getting that, I jokingly refer to it as brainwashing yourself, but your brain, it's neuroplasticity. You can believe anything you want to believe. And in this world today, especially, like it's the delusional people who are successful because they don't let the noise get in.
Yeah. I love that. Mm-hmm. Okay. So as we kind of wrap up here, what are some of the ways that now where you are, the company you're in, the role you're in, like the experience that you have, like what are the ways that you are showing up really authentically in it?
Yeah, I have really taken some themes to heart this year, especially. I show up curious instead of anxious. So that's a huge one for me, especially as so much change happens in a startup every day. Processes adjust, teams adjust, what have you. So taking the curiosity mindset, asking more questions over, oh, how's this going to affect me? I'm anxious all of a sudden. Setting boundaries over the burnout has been a huge one as well. I've definitely cared deeply about my reputation, and leveraging that as like long-term capital keeps me going as well. So always remembering that there's someone out there who would kill to be in your place right now. And just this gratitude and never-ending gratitude. I've been doing that a lot even this week. I think, when you go through moments where there's just so much going on, you have to stop. And I always stop and just name 3 things when I'm brushing my teeth in the morning that I'm grateful for. Or if I don't feel like getting out of bed, that gratitude really, really saves me.
Yeah. You mentioned before we hit record that things had been really busy and like just recentering on your routines and the things that work for you. So it sounds like gratitude's one of them. Obviously you do your thought work like in all moments, all of the time. What else really keeps you kind of grounded and regulated? Or what are your kind of like maintenance? What's your maintenance checklist?
Oh gosh, how much time do you have?
And do you still like escape to the forest?
I certainly do. Yeah. So nature is probably the most effective one. But let's say, it's a work day and I need to be on calls pretty much 9 to 5, what have you. I like to always start with a good morning routine, getting ahead of the day and not checking my work for the first hour and a half is essential. I'll always start with some activity, whether that's yoga or Pilates. I make sure I get a good like protein rich breakfast in because that really helps me think and be my best. A lot of anxiety can come from not having the proper nutrients. So making sure that that's set before I have my coffee.
Right. Exactly. Before you get the jitteriness. Yes.
That is a huge one. Yeah. And it's like so interesting that, I think as long as you have that take care of your physical, because your mood follows the actions. So, take those actions and eventually you'll start to feel ready for the day. A walk is a great one too. Some other things I do are meditation. I do that when I'm going to sleep. Usually at night because it makes me so tired. I do a lot of journaling. I love the sauna. That's something big at Seed Talent that we're all doing right now is, sauna, cold plunge, like regulating your nervous system through working out. I love to hang out with my sisters. They're my best friends. And just reconnecting with my family, giving my mom and dad a phone call and just being grateful that I have them in my life. And so many people maybe do not, and like recentering myself with a call to someone who I love. It can also be cooking. That's been a big one for me. If I feel anxious, just really diving into something more hands-on. So much of what I do is cerebral, and with the computer. So breaking away from the tech, getting into, some delicious soup making, or whatever I want to create for that day, and having a home cooked meal, lighting a candle. It's like all these little things. Like aromatherapy is huge for me. And then, having something to look forward to, I think might be the biggest incentive for my well-being, or the biggest opportunity to have an incentive for improving my well-being. So I will look out ahead and see what's coming up that I can get ready for. Maybe do a little action to prep for that. I get joy out of preparing for things because then I know on the day of I can truly be present to enjoy it. So those are just some of the things I do. I would say that, any version of that, even if it's a small 5-minute break from the screen to go out and just put your feet in the grass, that truly has been some of the best reset that I've done throughout my days.
Yeah, I'm going to need your list of forests that are close
you.
to the city. So
Yes, the
That
Labaw
sounds
was
great.
in Chicago. That's a great one.
Okay, noted. Okay, so as we wrap up, what is like one thing for you as you think about your leadership and your growth in the next year? Like, what's one goal or focus for you?
I have so many. But I want to really hone in on building rooms that people want to be part of. I've seen this theme, and as I was reflecting on speaking with you today, I've really seen this theme throughout my whole life, is that I love to be in rooms where there's just that intangible vibe. There's some good energy going on, and that can be in meeting rooms, like just bringing that energy to wherever I show up, whether it's an event or a gathering or my family. I really want to build rooms that people want to be part of. And how do you do that, right? You do that by showing up as your most authentic self and by listening. I'm really leaning into listening this year. And if I think that kind of comes from the sitting in the discomfort and giving myself that pause. Practicing that pause has been instrumental in my growth because I'm not saying things I regret. I'm actually able to learn so much more because I'm not waiting to respond. I'm having more authentic responses because I'm not formulating it before I actually hear what someone said. And I think that just slowing down, leaning into the pause, and leaning into my most authentic self is how I want the rest of this year to go.
Yeah, and I love the idea of going from, because I mean, what you do is curate experiences, right? It's what you've done from that first, adult job that you had. And I think thinking about how you do that in places where you already are going to be, but also then, like you said, creating the rooms, creating the networks, the communities, the whatever it is that people can go into and be themselves. So that's great.
Absolutely. Being yourself. That's all I ever want from people when they're around me, is to feel that safety and that openness and just positivity.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on. It was great talking about your career and hearing your reflections and lots of good tools.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure. Anytime.
Okay. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. One thing that really stands out to me about Leah and her career story is how she had these seemingly perfect next career steps become available to her at really opportune moments in her career and life. And when we really dove into it, it's all about how she moved toward things that she was passionate about, how she really represented herself consistently so that people would see her and know what she's capable of. And then when opportunities came up, really showing up very strongly to them and allowing herself to really believe in her capability and to learn along the way. Leah's approach to building her personal brand, her reputation, and visibility really involved tapping into her own authenticity, just being herself and posting things on LinkedIn and or representing herself out there in the industry in a way that feels very her. Actually, it was one of the reasons I asked her to come on the podcast with me in the first place. So I'm going to share a resource in the show notes. It's episode 61 of Working Your Way, where I had a friend and fellow entrepreneur, Kat, on to talk to all things personal branding with me. Now, if you're inspired to begin your personal brand building journey, or you just need a new spark of insight about yourself, this episode is for you. We talk about our own personal brand journeys and the ways that we work with our clients to really help them see themselves with clarity. And that clarity is really required to articulate these things about ourselves out into the world and start building that brand or put yourself out there and make yourself visible. Now, one other thing that Leah and I touched on toward the end of the conversation was how she learned and grew her way into the roles that she's in now. She created her own YouTube university to build the understanding of the elements of marketing that she maybe wasn't as familiar with. She had kind of had the event piece really locked in with all of her broad experience and her skill sets there. But things like SEO, search engine optimization, might have been newer to her. And so she needed to build up her foundation of knowledge there. It made me think of Amy also from episode 91 and how she built out her kind of learning journey on AI by creating a plan and customizing a curriculum for herself using resources that were readily available and affordable or free. We'll link that episode in the show notes for you in case you want some more inspiration on creating a learning journey for yourself. Now, while these may seem like things we don't have time for because the demands of our current jobs or our lives outside of work, I would say that putting some intention into them so that you can both be visible for great opportunities and build your own foundation for your career. All of this is what allows us to move toward roles that are a better fit or a bigger opportunity for us at the right time. So it's really about how to balance that short-term urgency of everything that needs to get done with the long-term importance of setting yourself up for success later and moving closer to a more aligned career in the long term, and opening up those doors for yourself by really establishing that foundation, whether it's opportunity in the form of more money, more learning, or a more sustainable use of our energy and different ways of living. It's really always worth it to build towards what's right for you. Thank you so much for being here. If you like this episode of Working Your Way, be sure to follow or subscribe so you'll always catch the latest. If you want to bring these kinds of conversations into your workplace, check out selfatwork.com to learn more about my team coaching, Enneagram workshops, keynote speaking, and other ways that we can work together. And to find detailed show notes, explore all the resources from all the episodes and all other things working your way, head to selfatwork.com/podcast. We'll see you next time.